What's up everyone, Andrew Baena here, and on today's video we are going to be taking a look at the brand new plugin from Bogren Digital. This plugin is the MLC Subzero 100, a plugin that is recreating the tones you can get from that actual amp, so it's an officially licensed amp plugin. I personally have never tried the original version of this amp before, but that doesn't really matter. All that really matters to me is, does it sound good? And that's all I want to know with this video. And by the end of this video, hopefully you'll know if you think it sounds good too. With that being said, there is also a free 14-day trial of this plugin, so I strongly encourage you to go download that in the link in the description and the pinned comment below and try it out yourself, because that is by far the best way to learn if it will match your workflow or not. So for this video, I am first going to show you what the plugin sounds like in a full demo mix. I wrote an original song called Pale Ore with my friend Johnny Chardulo. It's in drop A, and all of the guitar tones you're about to hear were using the MLC Subzero 100 plugin, and it sounds like this. Okay, so now that you've heard how the MLC Subzero 100 plugin sounds, I'm going to show you some of the specs and features of this plugin, and of course show you how it sounds on its own outside of a full demo mix. Let's get to it. Okay, so we're going to switch over to my desktop view so you can see what I am doing over on my PC. I've got Reaper loaded up here with an instance of the Subzero 100 plugin. We're going to go through all three of the main presets that I was using in this video, which are of course a heavy rhythm tone, a clean tone, and a lead tone. But before that, I'm just going to do like a really quick brief overview of the plugin. So as you can see in this main window, we have one section for pre-effects, or pedals that go before the amp. So we have a Vanilla Sky pedal and a Fascination Street OVD1 pedal. Both of these are more or less overdrive or boost pedals. Obviously the Fascination Street one is a little bit more typical to what you'd see from like a tube screamer type thing, level tone and drive. Whereas the Vanilla Sky is kind of the same idea, except you also have this white and blue knob. The white controls the treble boost and the blue controls the bass boost, so you just have a bit more control there. Next up, we have the main interface of the amp, so you can see the amp face here with all of the controls. So obviously we have power switch, gate, presence, depth, gain, volume, bass, middle, treble. You have the option as well to switch between a 6L6 or EL34 tube sound, and then your master output and your channel selector on the far right side here. So you have three different channels on this amp. And then on the bottom we have a couple different options, which are circuit feedback. You can have that at low or high, and you can also have the M45 switch, which kind of gives it more of like a British style circuit apparently, and then the bright switch, which you can have bright switch 1, off, or 2. Moving on, we have the cabinet section. This is one of the more interesting parts of this plugin because they've added this thing in called IRDX technology, which stands for Impulse Response Dynamics Amount. And more or less what it's supposed to do is it adds natural speaker movement, compression, and distortion to your overall cabinet sound. The really cool thing about this technology also that I noticed is that you can actually load your own impulse response, and you can still use the IRDX technology with any impulse response you have, which is actually really cool. So pretty much what it does is it gives you a bit more of that emulation of an actual speaker cabinet, because obviously the speaker is moving around within that cabinet as you're playing guitar, and this is more or less meant to simulate that from my understanding. But of course, if you don't want to load your own impulse response, this one also has a bunch. So it has both a modern cab and a vintage cab, and for both of those two different cabs you have 5 different microphone options. And you can also, of course, blend 2 different options. There's a speaker mix dial up here, so you can blend between the 2. And of course, you can move these mics all over the place, change the angle, all kinds of crazy stuff. Tons of options, and honestly, I probably won't go through all of them in this video, but I'll definitely play with that a little bit. Up next, of course, we have the equalizer section. This is pretty standard stuff. It's just a, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 band EQ. So, you know, different frequency ranges where you can boost or cut accordingly. Pretty standard stuff there. And then last but not least, in the final section, we have the post effects pedals, which are, of course, a delay and reverb pedal. Pretty standard controls on both of these. For the reverb, you have a low cut, pre-delay, size, and mix. And for the delay, we have mix, time, feedback. You can sync it to the tempo or not. I don't know why you would ever not sync it to the tempo personally, but the option is there. You can have ping pong off or on, and you can also tap the tempo. Again, you don't really need tap tempo if you just turn on the sync, obviously, because it'll just sync to whatever your DAW's tempo is, which is how I personally would use it. But I guess if you're using this plugin standalone, not in a recording context, then that might make a bit more sense for you. As for some of the menu features, of course, up top, if you click this preset, you can have all your presets here. So I got mine saved right there. There's factory presets and artist presets as well. So this is where you would just kind of scroll through those. And of course, you can save your own presets and open your preset folder to see your saved presets. Speaking of, if you would like to download the presets that I made for this video in collaboration with Johnny, you can get those for free. The link to that is going to be in the description below. One other cool feature, of course, is always the A/B functionalities. So let's say, for example, you're trying to decide between 2 heavy rhythm tones. On my A preset, I have my rhythm tone, and on B, I could go ahead and change that to be the factory default metal rhythm 3, let's say. And now when I hit play and listen to my track, I can switch between A or B, and that'll give me a lot easier way to compare between the 2 different tones with one instance of the plugin, which is very handy. Then on the sidebar here, of course, we have a couple of little things like license info, about, or preferences. This is where you can change your input mode from mono to stereo or vice versa. This is useful if you want to use only one instance of the plugin and have 2 audio sources. I did this for my clean tone, for example, because I recorded 2 clean guitar tracks, but both of them are going into the same instance of the plugin. I always like doing it that way. That's a lot easier, and it's easier on your computer because you're not running like 20 different instances of the same plugin, especially when you start adding reverb and delays. Things can get a little hairy. Okay, so now that I've given you a brief overview of the plugin, we're going to take a listen to the tone clips that I got for that demo track, starting off with the heavy rhythm tone. It sounds like this. So I was pretty happy with this rhythm tone. I thought it sounded really good. You can kind of see the settings that I got going on here. What we're going to do really quick is I'm just going to replay that and twist some knobs so you can hear what difference those make. And we're just going to play that one more time and keep going here. Oh yeah, it's also worth noting that up in the corner here, there's also the undo button and redo button, which is nice, so I can go ahead and reset all my settings to the way they were. I'm going to do that one more time because I do want to hear what the circuit feedback, the M45 switch, the bright switch, and the EL34 versus 6L6 sounds like for this preset, and I'm sure you're curious to hear that too. So one more time. I lied, we're going to do it one more time, but it is very interesting with that M45 switch. I can definitely see what they mean with emulating a British type circuit. It made the whole characteristic of this amp sound way different. In my opinion, I don't like it that much, but I know some people like that kind of sound, so that's a really cool feature. One more time, let's take a look at the bright switch and the 6L6 versus EL34. Okay, cool. So I personally don't hear too much of a difference between the two types of tubes. I know some people really care about this stuff. To be honest with you, I don't really care that much, but it's a nice feature to have. The bright switch, however, is really interesting. I definitely could hear a big difference between bright 1 and bright 2. I personally chose to use bright 1 because I think the tone was already bright enough and didn't need that much more. Okay, so now we're going to move over to the pedal section in the heavy rhythm tone. And again, I'm going to mess around with these two guys while the rhythm tone is going. So I had the Vanilla Sky going for my rhythm tone in particular with the settings as you can see here. So we're going to turn this off and on and hear how it compares to the OVD1 really quick, like this. Okay, cool. So it's really interesting, especially on this blue dial down here. You can definitely hear the bass boost, which I personally do not like at all. But again, if you're tuning to something normal and not drop A, that might be more useful. We're going to go ahead and turn that off and play around with the OVD1 instead. Same clip. Pretty much the same settings as the average tube screamer there, you know, level and tone at full, drive at minimum. Sounds pretty good, but let's play around with that. Let's set them all back to the midpoint and go from there. Next up, we're going to move over to the cabinet section and play around with this a little bit. There are a ton of features in this section alone, so there's no way that I'm going to get to all of them, but we'll play around with a few different features, especially this IRDX technology slider, as well as the speaker mix slider, because I think those are going to be the most noticeable differences. Let's take a listen. So yeah, really cool that you're able to kind of have a very simple slider between two different speakers and two different microphones. Really cool stuff. Gets even more interesting if you switch from the vintage cab to the modern cab, for example. So if you have the same mic with all the same positions and all that. So let's say, for example, you're trying to decide between the modern cab or the vintage cabinet. Easy way to do that, put them both on with the exact same microphone, exact same position, hit play, and just move that speaker mix dial around. Sounds really good, super easy way to compare between the two or blend the two, which is even better. Last but not least, again, there are obviously a bunch of different microphone options in here. I'm personally not going to go over that though. What I do want to go over is the IRDX technology dial because I think it's really interesting. So we're going to go ahead and turn that all the way off and then slide it up over time. Pretty cool stuff. You can definitely hear a way bigger difference when you bump it up to like the 150% range, which is obviously a little ridiculous. But even at 100%, I feel like once you know what you're listening for, it's definitely very clear that it's there. And it sounds pretty cool. It basically just is emulating the feel, so to speak, of a speaker actually moving in a cabinet, which obviously with an impulse response, it's not because it's a digital file. So it's cool that they were able to develop a technology that kind of simulates that experience. Sounds pretty sick. Next up is the EQ section. I feel like we probably don't really need to go over this, so I'm going to go ahead and skip to the end, which is the delay and reverb. Before this, we're actually going to switch over to clean tone because it's going to be way more obvious what is going on there. So let's do that really quick. Okay, so switching over to the clean tone, I'm going to show you what it sounds like first and foremost without any changes, and then we're going to play around with the delay and reverb pedal. So this is what the clean tone sounded like as is. Cool. So it sounds really good. As you can see, it has a ridiculous amount of delay and reverb on it right now. So if we go ahead and turn those off. So first we're gonna go ahead and add in that delay and play around with some of these settings without the reverb on. So things can get weird here really quickly, but basically with the time dial, as you can hear in the background, it's controlling the amount of times that things are delayed. I think I had it at a half note, but obviously you can have it at quarter note or whatever you want. So we're gonna put it at quarter note for now just to change things up. And then you have this mix dial where you can mix in how much delay you wanna be there. So again, that's with nothing. So in my opinion, around the 40% range is pretty good. Last but not least, we have the ping pong option and the feedback option. So let's take a listen to those. Cool, so the ping pong does pretty much exactly what you would think. It bounces the delay between the two speakers, which is really, really cool. Last but not least, let's take a listen to feedback. Cool, so that basically controls how many delayed notes you will hear total. So the greater the feedback, the more long it will delay, or the more repeated notes will happen, basically. Let's go ahead and turn that off and turn on the reverb and take a listen to that. Cool, so pretty nice and simple reverb here. That sounds really good. Let's just control the size, low cut, and pre-delay and take a listen to that. I had the pre-delay off entirely personally, so I'm definitely curious to hear what that's gonna sound like when I bump that up. Okay, so things are definitely getting pretty weird when you add in a bunch of that pre-delay. Let's take a listen to the size and low cut. Cool, so obviously the size controls kind of like the length of the reverb. And last but not least, let's take a listen to that low cut. Okay, pretty cool stuff. That is very handy. So in case you only want the higher notes to come through on the reverb, which is usually the case, things can get really muddy if you're adding reverb to low notes, in my opinion. So you can basically control like where the reverb actually kicks in at what frequency range. So if you want it to be 500 hertz and up, you can do that. Or if you want it off completely, that's fine too. Okay, and last but not least, we're going to take a listen to the lead tone. And in this section, what I wanted to focus on was the difference between the 3 different amp channels. I'm probably not going to play around with the pedals too much for this one because I kind of like where they're at, and I basically just did a deep dive on the reverb and delay anyways. So yeah, for this one we're just going to focus on mainly switching between channel 2 and 3 of the amp, but this is how the lead tone sounded that I was using. Cool, okay, so simple enough. If we want to switch to channel 2, we can do that. Also worth noting, when you switch channels on the amp, it actually snaps all of your controls to different settings, which is kind of cool. So if you're switching between your actual different channels on the amp, it's actually keeping track of your tone settings per amp channel. Very nice feature. So anyways, let's switch it to amp 2 instead of 3 and take a listen to that. Cool. Cool, so nice and simple. Obviously amp 3, which is the one I was using, has the most gain, hence it made the most sense for a lead tone. But of course you kind of have that mid gain channel as well as the low or clean channel. Obviously in this case the clean channel is still distorted because I do have that Vanilla Sky pedal going into the front of it. Okay, thank you all so much for watching this video. Again, a big thank you to Bogren Digital for sponsoring this video. Please be sure to go check out their website in the link in the description and the pinned comment below. You can get a free 14-day trial of this plugin, which is the perfect way to try it for yourself and decide if it is the right match for you. In addition to that, if you liked the demo song in this video, you can get an audio download, guitar tab, stems, or a shout out on the screen like these lovely people here over on my Patreon page. That is also going to be linked in the description below. That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching this video. I look forward to reading your comments, and I'll see you next time.